played Atari today.
Greetings, it's Adam with Irata Non Grata. I know I've been silent for a while. Like I said, in the past, I've been pretty busy with real work as far as stuff that pays the bills, and this channel does not pay the bills, doesn't pay anything, so more of a hobby thing. But yeah, Atari made some very interesting announcements this morning, and if you hadn't heard already, let's get you up to speed. Where they've got a new Pac-Man themed Atari 2600 Plus coming our way. I mean, I guess this idea popped into somebody's head back in 1982. This would have been the perfect sort of theme to have done with the 2600 when they released Pac-Man originally. That might have become a lot more valuable than the actual Pac-Man game. But yeah, better late than never, I guess. But yeah, these new Ghost Edition joysticks, CX40s with colors. Which, as far as I know, this is the first time they've ever done anything like this with colors on their consoles. Because, as I recall, I could be wrong, but as I recall, the very first time that anybody in the games industry created different colors of a game console was the Nintendo 64. And of course, they had all sorts of shades of colors on the joysticks and stuff. And themed consoles, I want to say that was the Xbox 360, at least when they had the face plates that you could change out. There was that. I can't remember. Perhaps there was somebody who did like a special edition of something back in the day. But again, this would have been really cool back in 82. But this is still cool now. If you're really into Pac-Man and Atari, and I mean, whether or not you already have an Atari 2600 Plus, like I didn't get the 2600 Plus. I got the 7800 Plus. But you know, I guess if I had the extra cash, this would be tempting. With the double feature on there, I noticed it mentions Atari 7800. And in the gameplay they were showing here, I mean, that looks like the arcade version. Now, granted, the 2600, or sorry, yeah, both the 2600 and 7800 Plus are emulation boxes. But I don't know. Maybe Pac-Man Plus has gone back and further enhanced his Pac-Man Pac-Man release for the 7800. Not sure. I mean, maybe I should look around here. But if you go to Atari.com, you can see this stuff. And so the CX40 Pluses are all $40. You could get the whole 5-pack for $200. Let's check out the double feature here. Experience the original video game romance that began in 1982 when Atari brought Pac-Man to home consoles for the first time. These icons are together again, and to celebrate their legacy, this 2-in-1 cartridge includes Pac-Man 7800, a new arcade-style version, along with Pac-Man 2600, the very first home version of the game. Okay, so... Interesting. So yeah, this would... I kind of wonder if... since this has to be compatible with the original hardware, the original 7800 as well, kind of wonder if there's going to be any additional hardware inside of the cartridge, because as I recall, again, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, as I recall, the Pac-Man Plus did, or Bob Crescenzo, I can never remember his last name precisely, sorry, he'd done a high resolution version, or using the 7800's 320 color modes, which was a higher resolution, higher than the NES, I think, but just didn't do as many colors and had some other quirks about it. But I think with what you could call mapper hardware or additional hardware, which the 7800 fully supported, you could get away with pushing the boundaries a little bit more. So I kind of wonder if there's anything like that in there. And of course, there's the infamous Atari 2600 version. Yes, I know there was Pac-Man 4K released some time ago on the 2600, which created a much more arcade faithful port. I mean, it wasn't 100% arcade faithful due to the 2600's limitations, but a home brewer, or several home brewers, have done interpretations of Pac-Man that were far closer to the arcade. And so I guess it'd be too late now that they, since they've already billed this as a double feature, but it'd be cool, in my humble opinion, to include those as well. Since they've obviously got something going on with Namco here, and you could see that from this. But before we get there, let's check out this trailer.
We had Atari Japan that we ended up selling.
So this is
Namco.
DLC for the Atari 50th anniversary collection.
Atari Japan actually put Namco in the video game business.
Attack formation. Wings ready, sir. Okay, I'm peeling off. Cover me.
You're watching television, somebody's playing a video game, they have an Xbox controller, it doesn't matter what they have. But what do you hear when you're watching it? You hear Pac-Man.
You hear this Pac-Man.
You hear this Pac-Man.
Galaxian, the arcade hit, now for the Atari 2600 system.
I mean, this is really the breakthrough video game that went from games selling 100,000 to it sold 10 million.
So, I tip my hat or salute Digital Eclipse for doing this. To me, this is one of the best collaborations I think I've ever seen Atari do. The only thing that you could do better, or that would be a bigger deal, would be Nintendo, since there were those Nintendo releases on both the 2600, well, actually the 2600, 5200, and the 7800, with like Mario Brothers, Donkey Kong. Actually, granted, Donkey Kong, it was Donkey Kong Jr., sorry, on the 2600 and 7800. Donkey Kong on the 2600 was done by Coleco. But either way, as that trailer mentioned, there was a very strong relationship between Namco and Atari back in the 70s, thanks to Atari Japan. And then, of course, the licensing deals. Now, the thing that's really significant to this as well is just the fact that Atari's marketing back in the 80s was so good, or at least the early 80s, was so good that a lot of people really thought that Pac-Man was an Atari-made game. They didn't realize that it was created by Namco. And that's just how fixed it became in American culture, or pop culture, as to the identity of Pac-Man. So like here, Atari, so back in the day you had licenses with the coin-op, and then you had licenses for home gaming. That actually still exists, it just doesn't happen quite as often anymore. And Atari, they weren't the first ones that was given the opportunity to grab Pac-Man for coin-op. If I'm recalling correctly, I think it was some no-name company named Game Plan. But Atari passed on it. They thought it was too easy of a game, because what they were seeing from focus testing was that a lot of their players were demanding harder, more challenging games. And so Pac-Man, which was just a four-way joystick, there was no fire buttons or anything like that, was again deemed too simple. And it eventually ended up in the hands of Bally Midway for the coin-op license, and they took a lot of liberties with that, which ended up losing them the license. But Atari, after seeing Pac-Man Fever explode, they secured the license for home, released it to the 2600, 5200, and never did the 7800. Of course, they did do Miss Pac-Man on the 7800, but that's where homebrews have had to come along and do Pac-Man like that. And so like this release, as we saw here on Atari.com, is really the first official time that Pac-Man gets to come to the 7800 like it should have been back in the day. But as also alluded to, not only will you have the DLC, you'll get cartridges, and so we're seeing re-releases of cartridges. I mean, that in itself is cool already, but now that we're getting licenses like Galaga and Xevious and Dig Dug coming to that. From that trailer, it did seem to imply that the coin-op version of at least Xevious would be making its way as a part of that DLC. I had hoped that anything else that Namco licensed to Atari for coin-op, like Dig Dug, would also get that same sort of thing going on there. Now, one thing to note is that it was 1985 or 86, somewhere around there, Namco bought a controlling interest in Atari Games. Now, this is still very confusing to a lot of people out there. Back in June 1984, Warner Brothers sold most of the Atari name and IP to Jack Trammell. But they did not sell the coin-operated division. That's when Atari Games was formed. And then anything released in arcades from June 1984 onward until about 1999 or so, when Midway, who had bought them in 99 or 98, changed their name to Midway Games West, which was stupid. But I guess it was to avoid problems with legal problems on the back end. That get more complicated. But either way, anything with the Atari Games logo on it, that was still owned by Warner for a long time. Currently, it is actually owned by Warner. It, as I mentioned, Midway had bought had bought the Atari Games thing, and then Midway went bankrupt in 2009, and then Warner Brothers bought Midway, and so that included all the Midway IP as well as the Atari Games IP. It's just, except for Gauntlet, I don't think Warner has done anything with any of those. In fact, I doubt that most people working at Warner even know that they own it, which is sad. But that's why you don't get things like Area 51 and Primal Rage and all that stuff. And so that's where, even with this deal that Atari's working on, they have to look at stuff pre-1984. So it's like, I wouldn't expect, this is probably also why they wouldn't have shown like Rolling Thunder or Dragon Spirit or whatever, which were games that were released in coin-op here through Atari Games. Because again, I forgot to mention, Namco bought a controlling interest in Atari Games in around 1985, 1986. And so that's why you did have several Atari Games titles that were licenses of Namco titles in the late 80s. Assault was another one of those. Yeah, this is great news overall. I'm excited for it. What about you guys? Let me know in the comments below, and we'll see you on the next video.